Our National History Day project, Triumph and Tragedy, The Blizzards of 1888 by Nicholas Song and
Luther Thompson.
The blizzards of 1888 were very tragic and many lives were lost. There were many blizzards in the year of 1888, but the main ones were the Children's Blizzard, also known as the Schoolhouse Blizzard, and the White Hurricane, also known as the Great Blizzard. The first blizzard that occurred was the Children's Blizzard on January 12, 1888. It occurred in the beginning of October. It was milder, but by the end of November in 1887, a year before the blizzard, there had been ice storms, snowstorms, and many sub-zero temperatures. In December, they had received 20.2 inches in Moorhead, 39.5 inches in Morris, and 33 inches in Mankato. On January 5th, a massive sleet storm coated drifts with ice. It occurred in most of the Midwest and killed 300 to 400 people.
Grocery stores were frozen shut and inaccessible. During the Children's Blizzard, children were trapped inside and outside their frozen one-room schoolhouses. This is the reason it was called the Schoolhouse Blizzard.
2 men rescued the children in the schoolhouse by tying a rope from the school to the nearest shelter to lead them to safety.
The second blizzard that occurred was the Great Blizzard that hit New York and other neighboring states on March 14th.
Trains were stopped, and food and coal were stuck in the snow. All of the sleeping cars in the trains were lent to the public as hotels. Women and children sat on the cold, hard floors eating food distributed by the railway officials. To make matters worse, the New York Stock Exchange closed down for the first time ever. It closed down for 2 days, as did many other things, such as groceries and telegraph communications. Power lines were also ripped down, and New York City was closed off from the rest of the world. Many of the people who lived in southwestern Minnesota jumped at the arrival of the fine weather in the morning of January 12th. Eric Olson, who was a Swedish bachelor farmer in Beaver Creek, took off on a walk. Johnny Walsh, a 10-year-old farmer's son in Avoca, went to visit a neighbor. What people didn't know, and could not know because the U.S. Army Signal Corps had chosen not to issue a cold wave warning on the previous night, was that a big blizzard was racing toward them from the west. During the 18 hours between January 11th and 12th, the storm covered 800 miles from southwestern Canada to southeastern Nebraska. Eventually, it blanketed Iowa, Nebraska, Dakota Territory, and much of southern Minnesota, hitting the southwestern corner particularly hard.
The storm struck with horrid force. According to some of the newspaper clips from the time, between 300 and 500 people died in this blizzard. An exact number hasn't been determined, in part because not all of the fatalities were accounted for. Some bodies were not found for days or even months. Eric Olson, the Beaver Creek farmer, was discovered a mile and a half from his home many days after the storm. Only his shoes were visible under the mounds of snow.
O.A. Hunt, a solicitor, was not found until April 1st, 80 days after January 12th, when the Children's Blizzard began.
The storm roared at 50 miles per hour. The temperatures dropped almost 100 degrees, from 50 degrees above to negative 48. Most or all storefronts were closed or frozen shut. After the Great Blizzard, New York was covered in 55 inches of snow.
There was a story about a woman named Minnie Freeman who saved 13 kids from her one-room schoolhouse, whose roof was ripped off during the storm, and that she tied a rope or a string to all her children and led them to safety. This story, however, is untrue, and the real truth is that there were 16 children. The roof did not rip off the schoolhouse, and 2 of the larger children escorted her to her home, and if they had not, she would have perished. The telegraph was from one of her lovers, which is why it was a popular story and why people thought it was true.
This was not a storm of drifting snowflakes, but of flash-frozen droplets firing sideways, an onslaught of speeding ice needles moving at more than 60 miles per hour. Even without the whiteout conditions, many people could not see because the microscopic bits of ice froze their eyes shut. In some places, though, caution prevailed. Schoolteacher Seymour Dopp in Pawnee City, Nebraska, kept his 17 students at school when the storm began at 2 p.m. They stayed overnight, burning stockpiled wood to keep warm. The next day, parents made their way over 5-foot snowdrifts to rescue their children.
These heroic events were most of what kept the Great Plains and most of the Midwest together. Many other heroic events happened, but most of them are undocumented. These events were very tragic and for households who lost precious family members that they once loved. However, some of the events that happened also changed.
One of the longest term effects occurring after the blizzard was the creation and upgrading of storm warning technology.
This blizzard was very harmful to America's telegraph, but with telegraph gaining popularity, a blizzard later would have dealt way more damage. All in all, this blizzard was horrible, yet taught America many very important lessons. We will never forget the tragic events that happened on these days. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this